Well, welcome. Tonight, how appropriate that we're celebrating our 400th show with a friend who came on and started the whole medical show tradition. Back then it was H1N1 that had everybody going. Today we have Zika.
Seems like every year there's a different virus.
Why don't we start with an introduction, Michael?
So I'm Michael Newstein. I'm an infectious disease physician at Milford Regional Medical Center. I've been there now for 16 years, and so I help the hospital take care of patients who have different infections.
Last time you came on, people came back and said, infectious diseases, aren't all diseases infectious?
Many are, and we're learning more and more that have to do something with infections. But contagious diseases, things I see most commonly are pneumonias and urinary infections and skin infections caused by bacteria, viruses, occasionally fungus. Some diseases probably aren't infectious, like heart disease or stroke, for example.
But it was just funny when I get the emails saying, I thought all diseases, nobody ever thought of cardiac, no, you're pretty well self-contained on some of them. Mm-hmm. The arbovirus, today, Zika seems to be the hot one for this year. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, Zika is a virus that's really exploded through the tropics. It's started out in Africa. That's a name like Zika, similar to Ebola, is an area of Africa. Zika is primarily transmitted by mosquitoes, and it's traveled from Africa throughout Asia, and now over the last year or two it's really expanded rapidly through this hemisphere in South America and into the Caribbean. In most cases it causes just a fever and a rash and some aches and pains, but it does have issues, particularly most importantly with pregnant women, and that in some small percentage of pregnant women it can harm the developing fetus, and occasionally can cause some more severe neurologic problems in people as well.
Well, we see the pictures on television of the effect it has where you have a very small head on a baby. Mm-hmm. And everybody panics, and rightfully so, because let's face it, if your daughter or mine was pregnant and there was 1% chance, mm-hmm. we would be remiss not to react. Mm-hmm. But now, what are the odds that somebody is going to contract? Here we are, center of the universe, Milford. Mm-hmm. What are the odds that we're going to see somebody contracting Zika?
Well, there have been many cases in this country, hundreds of cases, but they've all been imported. Nobody, as of yet, has acquired the infection from a mosquito bite here. Zika can be spread by sexual contact as well as the mosquito. So the people who've gotten it here have either traveled to another country or have had sex with somebody who's traveled to another country.
And when you look at a Zika virus, so if I go to Africa, it started. Mm-hmm. And I think of a mosquito that maybe travels, 100 yards in its lifetime? Mm-hmm. That's a long way around to get to Brazil.
Yep. And it's probably spread, we think, definitely spread by people who are infected, get on a plane and go to another place. And then the mosquitoes feed on that person and spread.
So realistically, we created Zika by traveling to South America, and now a mosquito, poor little innocent mosquito, bites an infected person, and then it starts to spread again.
Yes.
How long does the Zika virus last in a person?
Well, we don't know all the details yet because it's only been the last year that people have really known about the virus or particularly studied it. They know that in some cases it can last for weeks and even months, particularly in men, and it can stay in the genital secretions of men. So that's one area of concern.
But it would be like any other infection in my mind, you know, that only this one has hopefully a termination point. So if you did go to South America, you were infected, you would take precautions for 6 months or whatever to make sure that, I mean, if you have a partner, that he or she is not going to become infected by you.
Exactly.
You know, it just doesn't seem like a huge compromise.
The concern, though, is that some of the mosquitoes that we know are transmitting the virus in the Caribbean and South America, we have some of those same mosquitoes. So there's a concern that someone comes here and one of our local mosquitoes could get infected, then begin the cycle of transmission by mosquitoes as well.
Now, when I was reading up for tonight, I noticed there's like 14 or 15 different kinds of mosquitoes. Can they all carry the arboviruses?
No, the ones that we're particularly concerned about are in Aedes. They're called Aedes mosquitoes, Aedes, I believe. And there are two. There's one called Aedes aegypti, and that's mainly in the southern United States. It can extend up to even as far as New York, but not up here. And there's another one called Aedes albopictus, and that one is even found around here rarely. That one can potentially transmit Zika as well as some other viruses, including dengue and one called chikungunya.
I still can't pronounce that.
But although they are potentially able to transmit these three viruses, it hasn't happened yet, though everybody's waiting for that.
Now, when we look at the mechanism of transmission, when a mosquito lands on you and it transmits the virus, it's always a question that says, okay, wait a minute. If the Zika virus or others are so lethal or have such strong side effects, why isn't the mosquito affected?
Well, you know, viruses tend to be very restricted in what type of animals they make sick. And, you know, we're pretty different than mosquitoes. So while the virus in some cases can replicate within the mosquito, usually doesn't make them sick.
Now, I was reading something about how the mosquitoes, they are able to clip the ends off and inactivate the Zika virus. And really where you run into danger is if the mosquito is infected, before it's denatured, both ends, and it bites you, it's giving you live virus, not a denatured form. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not aware of all that information, but yeah, I mean, different viruses are transmitted at different stages, so it makes sense. Yeah.
So now when a mosquito bites you, what actually happens?
Well, a mosquito bites you, it sticks its proboscis, of the pointy part, into your skin, into a capillary, small vessel, and sucks up blood. And then it usually injects something to stop that blood from pouring out.
So like an anticoagulant?
Yep. So it can make an escape. So it's actually usually that what it's not so much what it takes out of you, but what it spits back into you.
Okay, so when it's giving you the anesthesia so you don't
Yeah.
scratch it out right away,
Yeah.
and the anticoagulant so the blood flows,
Yeah.
that's when you're getting the backwash.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense, because I'm trying to figure out, okay, why does it take any time to give me part of its blood? It wants to pull from me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really nothing you can do, is there, once it bites you?
Well, if you swat it early enough, I imagine, but the key is prevention. These mosquitoes are a little different than the typical mosquitoes we're usually familiar with. The typical mosquitoes that bother us or out on our deck or walking around in the evening, they're the different type, the big ones that buzz around.
I have bow wings.
These ones are smaller, and they can bite even during the day, so they're more difficult to deal with. But what we know is they like little pools of water in undrained gutters or tires that are filled with water, and they can breed in those areas. So to help prevent these type of mosquitoes, to drain all the water around your house that's lying around in pots and things like that, that would help. Wearing mosquito repellent, but that's particularly true if you travel to an area where these mosquitoes are more common, like in particular where Zika is too. So in the Caribbean or South America or Africa, it's important to minimize exposures to these mosquitoes.
I mean, we're getting back to the old ways of saying, don't leave stagnant pools of water laying around your yard, even small ones. So if you got a wheelbarrow, turn it over.
Exactly.
And that just doesn't help any mosquito.
Yeah. And we know that we're focused on Zika right now, but similar transmission can occur. There's West Nile virus and equine encephalitis virus. There are other, thankfully, very rare infections that you can get from mosquitoes here.
You bring it up as I was looking. There were so many encephalites.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking, there's Japanese, there's St. Louis, what was it, Rift Valley fever?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you probably all know these. I'd never heard of Ross River fever.
Mm-hmm.
Or you hear about West Nile, because the minute some mosquito is caught every year and analyzed, get West Nile, all the alarms go up. What's the difference between these?
Well, they're often related, similar viruses, but they're different in different areas. They're different pools of infected mosquitoes, different viruses. So in Asia, there's the Japanese encephalitis virus. There's, as you mentioned, all these different other viruses that are present in Africa and Asia. Some of them have been transmitted over here. West Nile, you get the name, it was from Africa originally.
And that one, I mean, I read up that it came first identified in 2003, and you turn around and say within, 5 years, it was in 48 states? It just seems like an amazing transmission rate.
It was. It really it expanded initially. It was a concern in the Northeast. And then in the next few years, it's made its way to the West, and it's actually more of a problem in the West Coast now than the East Coast.
What happens if you get West Nile virus?
Well, with West Nile virus, and it's true probably of a lot of these type of infections, a lot of people, probably younger or healthier people, are often infected and don't even know they're infected. But with West Nile in particular, that's true. Young people are probably infected, and maybe they feel like they have the flu or have a bit of a headache. Rarely healthy people get sick, but often people who are older, people whose immune systems are more compromised, they can develop neurologic symptoms, bad headaches, a type of meningitis, or even encephalitis, which is inflammation and damage to the brain.
But now, if I got bitten by a mosquito with West Nile, even if I'm young, which obviously I'm not, and I'm asymptomatic, does it eventually go away?
Oh yeah. All these viruses go away at some point. We're learning more about Zika, and in some areas of the body it tends to persist. In the case of Zika, it can persist in the male genital tract for a while, which can make it a more dangerous sexually transmitted disease. So Zika is very strange. It's both mosquito-borne and sexually transmitted. That's not true of these other ones that we mentioned.
It just sounds terrible to old men. You're telling me it's going to settle down there?
Well, it doesn't cause any problem there, but yeah.
Mentally it would. I don't want some virus. But when we look at something like a yellow fever, and you hear that 200,000 cases a year, 30,000 deaths. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But we don't hear about it.
Yeah. Well, we don't hear a lot about what's going on in the developed world, developing world rather, until it threatens us. Often, last year we were talking about Ebola, and it was a big problem in Africa, but we became concerned about it when
you, Jeff, the whole crowd had to show up because there was one in this area?
There was one case that we were concerned about, but we ruled it out, yeah.
So even the possibility of one got, the finest minds in our infectious disease team to come on and talk about it. We don't see 200,000 cases getting anybody excited about yellow fever up here.
Yeah. Well, Ebola was a special case because it was transmitted fairly easily, and it was a very lethal virus.
And, I remember getting a vaccine when we went down to Brazil for all sorts of things, like I think yellow fever was one that, they were like, well, are you going near the Amazon? I said, don't plan to. So they made it optional. When I asked about the occurrence, since my daughter was going with me, I said, okay, that's not an option. Again, if there's any risk, so it's easy to say, I'm a manly man, I'll fight off that mosquito. But all of a sudden when you say, yeah, let's be serious, it's your daughter. But make sure you don't have stagnant pools of water. Wear mosquito repellent with DEET or something on it. Does it work?
DEET works, yes, and there are other alternatives to DEET as well, but DEET is, certainly well studied, and it works.
Well, the TV commercials all talk about how much DEET they have. What other alternatives are there?
There are other compounds that you can put on your clothes, for example, that will last on your clothes. Some people are worried about potential problems with DEET, which I don't think are really problems. So if you didn't want to use DEET, there's something called pyrethrin. You can soak your clothes in that.
Pyrethrins?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. That was one of the first HPLC assays we did because everybody was freaking out about exposure to pyrethrins. Now they're back and they're okay?
Yep. So, yeah, there are other alternatives.
Now, if I have a long sleeve shirt, are the little harpoons, they're little proboscis, are they long enough to get through my shirt?
Well, unless it's a very sheer, lightweight shirt, probably not, no.
So again, if you're going out late in the day, like dusk, isn't that when most of them are active?
Most of them, but again, the Zika, the Aedes type mosquitoes that transmit Zika and dengue can also
Those little
be.
guys work all day.
Yep. Yep.
And you see all these wonderful contraptions that create CO2.
Mm-hmm.
I always worry because I remember the bag-a-bug where they put some of the Japanese beetle pheromones on a stick.
Oh yeah.
And what you had to figure out is which neighbor did you hate, because you really want to put the bag-a-bug in their yard, because it brought all of the Japanese beetles together. And I remember I tried it one year, and sure enough, some of them die and lay larvae, which become grubs. And then we had all our friendly skunks coming to dine on the grubs. So do these CO2 things actually work, do you think?
I think not very well, but I think for a limited area, you could probably get rid of them. But they're everywhere, and I think what the local governments do when they see one of these dangerous diseases being present in the mosquitoes, and they're constantly monitoring mosquitoes. If they see Eastern equine encephalitis or West Nile, they'll do spraying, and I think that's probably more effective. Probably the most effective thing for mosquitoes was DDT, but that had other problems.
DDT and DDE, you sit there and say, what a wonderful pesticide. It even took care of the birds, the people.
Yeah.
When you look at effectiveness, boy, it did cause havoc in the nervous system. But dang thing wouldn't go away and just went up the food chain.
Yeah.
Now, when I was reading, it said some of these viruses are transmitted from birds to human. Okay, I'm confused. How does that happen?
Well, mosquitoes bite birds. And West Nile, West Nile in particular likes birds as well. So, so those mosquitoes can bite birds and then bite us.
So it's still a mosquito intermediate.
Yeah.
The bird can be the carrier, but the mosquito is the one that's. I'm trying to think. I don't remember a bird ever biting me lately. What else is, when you look at areas, the mosquitoes are the mosquitoes. I still don't know how, to deal with them. We used to when we were at Maryland Yacht, they had these enormous foggers. And they just would fog the whole area. I think every insect.
Yeah, I think it's common sense, using insect repellents, staying out of, not staying around where there's a lot of mosquitoes or times where there's a lot of mosquitoes. And, again, that's particularly true if people are traveling where some of these dangerous mosquitoes are.
And then if you do travel to those areas, can you come back and have yourself tested?
Well, this is a changing field about who will test for Zika. Right now, it's very regulated. It's the State Department of Public Health and the CDC will test. But they're really focusing on pregnant women because they want to make sure they diagnose them because they're at risk.
But now, Michael, if I went to Brazil, I went to Venezuela, I go down, I go to Western Africa, I may or may not know whether a little guy bit me. So I come home and I want to have a long discussion with my partner. That's a huge risk.
It is. I think with Zika, many people, but not everybody, will feel sick when they get Zika. But But there are some people who don't. So not being sick, not having the fevers and the rash and the headaches, there's still some possibility.
But could I come home and go to a Quest, a lab core somewhere, and go to the hospital? Uncle Phil will kill me if I use their names and not say the Milford Hospital. Have my blood drawn and say, let me know, am I infected?
Yeah, my understanding of how they're regulating the testing right now is not, you can't just come and ask to be tested. Everything is going through the public health authorities, the DPH, and they'll determine who they feel needs to be tested. If you're, if you have a partner who's thinking of becoming pregnant and you've traveled to an endemic area, I think in some cases they will test you, but it's, and it changes. What they recommend changes every week. Yeah. So what we say today may not be relevant.
I more worry, we're not intending to get pregnant, but surprise. So barring abstinence for 6 months or use of some protection, you're putting your partner, your potential son or daughter at risk. So I'm just surprised, because I could see me coming home saying, if I got to pay for it out of my pocket, draw my blood. I want to know.
Yeah. I'm not sure I don't think testing is available for that right now. That might change, but right now it's very regulated.
So now I turn around and I say, I'm being a good mosquito preventer. I'm doing all the right stuff. And I go play in the yard. And I'm all worried about mosquitoes. Shouldn't I be worried about my friends, the ticks?
Oh, yes. And, we're moving from the potential to the actual now because, we're filming this in June, and we're seeing a lot of tick-borne illness right now in the hospital. They're both blood-sucking insects. Ticks are more problematic here as far as transmitting diseases. A lot of us know about Lyme disease, and that's a big problem. But ticks can transmit a number of different diseases. And there's another disease called anaplasmosis, which is another bacteria, but that can make people pretty sick. And we've seen several people each week coming in with this.
So, when I think of Lyme, I think of, our friend, was it Borrelia burgdorferi? This is a different bacteria. Now, is it the same ticks? Because last time you said there were dog ticks, deer ticks, Lone Star ticks, and I guess we don't get the Rocky Mountain spotted ticks out here.
No, I mean the big one, the one that is most common and is most capable of transmitting these ones are the small little deer ticks.
And they're the smallest little critters of all of them, right?
Yeah, yeah. So they're the ones. They have different stages. So early on in the year, they're little nymphs, and they're literally the size of a poppy seed. But as they go through their phases, they get a little bit bigger, but they're still pretty small. They're not the big dog ticks, the ones that you see hang off of your dog. These are smaller.
But now, do they bite onto dogs and cats?
They do, yeah.
So it's not, when you think of, I was always amazed when we had the clinical laboratory that somebody would send in 3 or 4 or 5 ticks that were taken off a patient. How you could have 5 ticks and 3 of them engorged and not notice?
Well, they bite, particularly the deer ticks. First of all, they're small and they can't travel very fast. And also they're just efficient buggers, so they land on you and they'll bite you pretty close to where they land on you. So it might be on the back of your leg. You may not notice them.
How do they get on me? I'm walking through my yard. Now, again, I'm a bit naive, but the tick is down there. What is it, super tick? It puts its cape on and jumps up?
Well, it climbs up on grass or plants. So if you brush against grass or plants or your dog who has them on you, it can jump on you.
So they'll get on my dog. Takes what, about a day to become engorged, or?
Yeah, it really takes, for humans, it can take 2 days to be fully engorged. Yeah.
when, if I found one, because let's face it, you could be walking out in the yard.
Yep.
I come in the house, I change my clothes, and there's a little critter.
Mm-hmm.
What are the odds on me getting, Mr. Borrelia or his cousin Bergdorfi or anything on that line to be transmitted if I got it within the hour or so?
If you got it within an hour, there's no chance. It really takes, for Lyme disease in particular, it probably takes 2 days to transmit. So it's at the end when it's injecting, it's gotten its blood meal. That's when the Lyme disease bug can be transmitted.
So realistically, this sounds gross. You deal with all the creepy crawlers daily. If I left ticks on me for 2 days, then I can really have a higher chance of getting infected.
Yes.
I find it hard to believe that even in a rotund old man's body, that I wouldn't notice creepy crawlers on me for 2 days.
Well, a lot of people don't. They're wee little creepy crawlers.
So, again, if we take a step back and say, what do you do? Put on my winter coat and it would be less than pleasant with 90-degree heat. What do I do to minimize exposure?
Well, similar to mosquitoes, DEET is your friend, I think, particularly spraying it on exposed areas. But, other things as well, if you're walking out in the woods, to have high socks, long pants if you're really out in the in high grass or woods. But also when you come in to do a tick check, they're hard to see, but if you look carefully, you can usually see them. And if you detect them early, ideally before they bite or when they've just bitten, then you could remove them and you won't have any risk.
So realistically, I don't want to seem trite about it, but go up to the bathroom, take off your clothes, and just systematically go through yourself and make sure there's nothing on there that you didn't start with.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Seems rather reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And the DEET, so when we think of mosquito spray, that's really just insect repellent.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll work for ticks as well.
Exactly.
Now, if I find a tick,
Mm-hmm.
My mother always told me you had to take tweezers
Mm-hmm.
and squeeze and get under the head and squeeze the little guy out, or get something hot and touch its little bum so it jumps off.
Yeah, I don't think the hot or Vaseline or all these old wives' tales.
Well, in the old days when everybody smoked, you'd said get a cigarette and burn its little bum with a cigarette. The problem is, luckily,
Mm-hmm.
we don't know many people who smoke anymore, so there's not like lighters and cigarettes hanging around.
Yeah, what people recommend is getting tweezers, and it's not entirely painless, because what you want to do is get the mosquito and maybe a little bit of your skin too, and pull the whole thing out. And usually you will take a little piece of your skin with it, so that's the best way to get it out.
But it beats leaving it.
Yeah.
But if I just grab it, the thing was always you're leaving the head inside.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can become infected.
Yep.
Is there a disease warning with that? It can't infect me anymore if I've taken 3/4 of its little body away, can it?
Well, if you have the jaw parts or head parts in there, they can be irritating, and they can sort of fester for a while, potentially even get infected. Yeah.
And is that more, when you look at if my daughter or darling bride, my oldest, gets an insect bite, oh my God, they blow right up. My youngest and I have too much Portuguese in us. No self-respecting insect will bite us.
Mm-hmm.
So, we get bit, or stung by a bee. It's like, yeah, that's annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I have to pull the stinger out, but I don't blow up. That's just genetics, or?
Yeah, some people have different reactions.
but there's nothing you can do. You're born that way, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Tick-wise, if it gets on my dog,
Mm-hmm.
and again, hopefully with my hounds, they all want affection. So you run your hands on the dog, and every once in a while a tick will show up,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll hopefully pull it out correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any danger after that to the family?
Well, you should dispose of the tick that you pull out, either in some place where it won't escape in the toilet or...
I was going to say, I like giving them a nice, relaxing swimming exercise.
Yeah.
Right into the toilet, hit the button, and let it go.
Yeah.
But how about the animal itself?
Well, dogs, because they're outdoors a lot and because they're low to the ground, a lot of dogs get Lyme disease. Usually it's not a big deal for them. Sometimes they can get a little lame, speaking as a dog owner myself. And a dog owner whose dog has had Lyme disease, and often they're lame a little bit, but usually they get over it, and the treatment usually works very quickly for them.
So you can treat the Lyme disease?
Yes.
Because that was, the thing I worried about most is if, the dog gets Lyme or something, and not that the dog would bite you, but, if you play with it, it could, cut skin or whatever by accident.
Well, Lyme disease is transmitted by ticks. That's the only way you can get it.
So there you're safe.
Yep.
My quarter pounder no cheese is a little bit bigger than the tick, so I think you could take it on.
Yep.
What else is keeping you busy these days?
Well, right now Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses are keeping me busy, but we're always planning for the next infections. So last year we were planning, and I think the planning was very helpful for Ebola. We're always planning for different epidemics that could occur. We always prepare for the flu, and the flu season just left us a little while ago, preparing for the next flu. We're also trying to make our hospital as safe as possible. Being in a hospital is not ever an entirely safe place because there are a lot of sick people with different infections.
Yeah, healthy people don't go to the hospital voluntarily.
Yes. So one of my big focuses is trying to prevent infections from spreading from one patient to another.
So I imagine things like pneumonia and all must be high on the list.
Yeah, certain types of pneumonia, particularly influenza, can be transmitted pretty quickly.
Are we seeing, or are you dealing with any of the diseases that, like TB and others that?
Yeah, occasionally, thankfully rarely, but we do see cases of tuberculosis, often from people coming from other areas.
Well, for the longest time we thought we had eradicated it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we get immigrants coming in from areas that weren't,
Mm-hmm.
we had to increase. I was always amazed at how efficient the visiting nurses are, because we had to increase their budget.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, there's no slam, it's just many of the people coming in aren't the most highly educated people.
Yeah.
So they would take 3/4 of their treatments,
Mm-hmm.
not kind of understanding that they're doing some genetic manipulation and creating superbug.
And it's from all over the world. We do have, we do take care of people with tuberculosis or people who've been exposed to tuberculosis. So we could have a whole show about TB if you want. But most people who are exposed to tuberculosis don't get sick with tuberculosis. So one of it sort of just lays dormant in them. Then it may come out even decades later.
So you could be asymptomatic for a decade? Or more?
Many decades, yeah. So one of our goals is to identify people who've been exposed to tuberculosis and treat them before they get sick. And,
I got to ask you.
Yeah.
Is it written like there's a barcode? I've been to TB land. How do you?
Well,
How do you notice?
the most common way is, and we do this for all healthcare providers, is to get a skin test, and we usually get it every year. And if your skin test shows that you've been exposed to tuberculosis, then there are treatment options to help you from getting sick from tuberculosis.
But then how do you trace it back?
Well, that's where our DPH friends and help us. In the group of patients we take care of, it's, we see people from all continents. It's people from South America, people from Africa, people from India, and even people from Europe. I taken care of some people from Portugal with tuberculosis.
And they're mainly European, or were they like Angolan, Portuguese, or?
No, European, because in Europe, and even in this country, but in Europe 50 years ago, certainly 70 years ago, there was a lot of TB. In this country, same time there was more TB than there was too. So we see people who've never left the country have tuberculosis as well.
It's amazing because you never hear about it. The first time I heard about it was when we were told that to ensure compliance, the nurses were carrying the treatments and making sure that they witnessed the patients taking them.
Mm-hmm.
And it just dawned on me. I said, well, I guess if you have crowded areas, what a breeding ground for something like TB.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do bring it in, you got 10 people trying to exist, trying to do the best they can. There's good odds that you're going to pass that around.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen it go to children in the schools, have we?
No. Again, there may have, there are people who've been exposed. No children that I'm aware of have gotten sick from it, but we've treated people who've been exposed to it.
Because that's always the biggest worry.
Mm-hmm.
I have a grandson now who's 10 months, and we send him to the incubator my daughter sends him to the incubator.
Daycare.
Mm-hmm. And that has to be the most efficient way of building an immune system, because it seems like, what is it? I called it hoof and mouth and got yelled at. Hand, foot, and mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And once one of them got it, they shared with everybody.
Yep.
So, I would imagine that things like that have to drive a lot of people crazy, wondering what could they do.
Yep.
Because something like, is it officially hand, foot, and mouth?
Hand, foot, and mouth, yes, Coxsackie virus.
The Coxsackie virus, because if I call it hoof and mouth, it's like, it's an insult.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything you can do?
Well, most viruses, there's no real, a lot of viruses, our treatments are either not very good or your body fights it off anyway, and that's true for a lot of these diseases, like the common cold or Coxsackie virus. There's not much to do. It's just good old hand hygiene, washing your hands. With kids, it's a little more tricky. They tend not to. But being careful when you're changing their diapers and
they also tend to put their hands in their other kids' mouths and.
Mm-hmm. And they don't have immune systems, so when they get sick, they may not get very sick, but the amount of virus that they have is much higher than what we would have. So they're become much more efficient spreaders because they have more virus.
So the viral load is higher in my grandson than in an old man?
Usually, yeah.
Because I always figured that his body is processing it so quickly. Mm-hmm. I remember when, I think it was chicken pox? I wasn't sure I ever had it. Mm-hmm. And my oldest daughter came back from the incubator, all poxed. My wife was saying, stay away from her, don't go near her, because getting it as an adult will not be pleasant. And I was good for almost a day.
No, and then you got it.
Well, no, what ends up happening is my daughter looked at me and said, Daddy, can I cuddle?
Mm-hmm. Well, you probably had it anyway, because most people in this country
Apparently, I must have had it because my wife comes home and there's my daughter curled up.
Mm-hmm.
Says, you are dead. Mm-hmm. And I never got it. Mm-hmm. And then my youngest daughter, I think, got 2 pox, you know, like 2 little spots. And it was the pox, but that was it. And we figured it must have been the same for me, that when I was a child I got, you know, 1 or 2 little poxes, poxi, whatever you call it, and never noticed because it wasn't like.
Or you had it as a little kid and you never knew about it.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't have gotten it. And you grew up around here, right?
In Milford.
Yeah. How many brothers and sisters?
None, just me.
Oh, okay. So maybe you escaped it. I don't know.
We don't. I could not have escaped it because we figure with my oldest rubbing up against me, sleeping in my arms.
Yeah.
If I didn't.
As a child, I meant maybe.
Oh, as a child, I might have.
Yeah.
What other diseases are around that we should worry about?
Well, you know, I think, you know, things that we can take care of. And again, we're filming this in June, but flu is a big one. Pneumonia is a big one. You mentioned chicken pox. So what I'm getting to is vaccines. Vaccines can help prevent influenza. They can help prevent certain types of pneumonia. But, you know, for us, we're on the chicken pox subject. The same virus that causes chicken pox lays dormant in you and can come out and cause shingles. Yeah. And there's a good vaccine now that helps prevent shingles. So if you're above 50, or particularly if you're above 60, you really should get the shingles vaccine.
I got to get harpooned again? Every time you come on the show, I get more harpoons.
Yep.
But, you know, you hear, I hate to say sociology majors talking about how you should never have your child vaccinated. I know my opinion of that, but let me ask you, do you see any real negative to the common vaccines out there?
No. They're studied well. You know, there was a sort of a pseudo controversy about some of the childhood vaccines, particularly the measles, mumps, rubella, or MMR vaccine. There was something that's
causing autism,
being totally discredited that caused about it causing autism. That's been discredited. It was fraudulent research, actually. And we do see mumps and measles and rubella. They're back. All those diseases particularly measles, we've had cases in
really?
Milford. Yeah. And so,
now, is it local people that weren't vaccinated? I mean, local kids, or is it somebody coming in from the outside?
Well, the cases that have been in Massachusetts recently, a lot of them are people who are vaccinated. The vaccines work for most people, but it's not 100%. So if it only works 90%, there's still a 10% chance that you'd be susceptible if you were exposed. So somebody comes in and, you know, measles, it has a very high attack rate. The most contagious virus there is probably is measles.
Really?
Yeah. So if you have one person who has it, it can spread to multiple people.
But now, if you had measles and I've been vaccinated, do I have a 90% chance that I'm not going to get it from you?
Probably, yeah, but you have a 10% chance of getting it, and if you get it, then you could spread it to 10 other people, so.
Yeah, but at least that way, okay, there's 10% chance that you could get it.
Yeah.
And then I have to be 10% of the 10%. You know,
Yeah.
you're down to 1%
Yep.
very quickly.
Yep, so vaccines will protect you. And measles, you know, in the old days, everybody got measles, but it still caused serious problems in some people. So the vaccine is important.
So when you look at overall, you know, the library of harpoons I should endure. I mean, obviously as a kid, MMR.
Yeah. Pertussis is something we see
The
a lot.
whooping cough thing?
Yes. That's something that affects adults too. It's a big problem.
That's one I think my daughter demanded that we get when my grandson was coming into the world. She actually didn't demand it. She just said, if you ever want to touch your grandson, you will go get the pertussis vaccine.
Yeah.
Okay, that seemed like an easy one. So you got those two, annual flu.
Yes. And then the pneumonia shot for many people, particularly when you get older, it's a good vaccine to get if you have any significant illnesses, to get the pneumonia shot. That's very effective, and kids are getting the same shot as well. So that's been very, very effective in reducing a certain type of pneumonia called pneumococcal pneumonia.
Now, how often? I mean, the flu shot I have to get every year because 3 strains and they move one.
Yeah.
So I got to get that every year.
Yeah. The other vaccines vary, and I actually don't have all the information in my mind that much, because I actually don't give vaccines too much. Primary care physicians do.
Even CVS.
Yeah.
For my flu shot, when I went into the CVS, the young lady asked me, would you like to get harpooned? And it was just so easy. Okay, go ahead, bang, I'm done, see ya. So, I've run out. I have, when I remember an anesthesiologist asked me, do you have any allergies? I said, yes. Having my body stabbed with metal sharp objects. But they're making it so easy. And the delivery mechanism, you always envision it's this large harpoon that's going to go through my arm, but you almost don't even feel it. It's just annoying.
Yep, exactly.
So pneumonia, but is that an annual? Is it every 5 years?
It's either 5 or 10 years.
Okay.
It depends on some variables, yeah. So the only one that's every year is influenza. Things like pneumonia. For adults now, the shingles vaccine, as we mentioned, those are...
I haven't had that, so now I've added...
Yeah.
Once more you come on and I get harpooned.
Yep, yep. So, yeah, and your doctor or even CVS or pharmacies or minute clinics will let you know what you need to get.
And again, when I look at the whole organization that Uncle Phil's put together, I went to Dr. Carlson, good Holy Cross boy, and right next, I didn't have to leave the building. I walk out with my little piece of paper and go find the vampire, and she came out and drew blood and poked and prodded and did all the things. So, it's become so easy to be compliant.
Yep.
It's kind of hard when you look and say, okay, what excuse can I come up with not to? Now, I did hear this year that the aerosol version of the flu vaccine,
The flu mist, yes.
the flu mist, didn't perform at the same level as the harpoon.
Yeah, which is a shame because kids liked it. Kids always hate needles, and it seemed to
men hate needles.
It seemed to be that vaccine had a lot of promise initially because it was a live vaccine, and the vaccine theoretically could have been more effective. And what they found is that in adults it probably wasn't as effective. And now they're finding even in kids it probably wasn't effective. So the theory behind it was good, but for some reason it didn't perform as well.
But I mean, realistically, the mist just means you don't get stabbed. You don't get a needle put in your arm.
Yeah.
But, over the years, it seems like the media picks up on when one of the 3 strains was the wrong one. But is there really any downside?
There really isn't for most vaccines, but in the flu vaccine in particular, and the flu vaccine is safe. Sometimes there's some local irritation. Sometimes you feel maybe slightly under the weather for a day, but that's probably your immune system getting revved up. But we know, people who get the flu shot tend not to see the doctor as much. They tend not to get hospitalized as much. They tend not to get pneumonia as much. Well, so they know, people who get the flu shot are healthier than people who don't.
And again, when I think of the option of saying, okay, it didn't work as well last year as it should, so I won't get it this year. Well,
and it's not perfect, but I guess the saying that the perfect is the enemy of the good. A little, some protection's better than no protection.
yeah, I mean, I don't envy any virologist trying to predict, 6 months, 8 months from now, what 3 strains are going to be the most dominant, because they can change on them.
Yes.
And other than that, I mean, you turn around and say you do the best you can, and let's just hope that next year, they hit it. Would you recommend the normal versus the mist?
Well, the mist, I think, is not even going to be recommended next year.
Oh.
Yeah. So, as I said, the mist was a good idea when it first came out, but the track record has shown it's not as effective as a shot, even in kids. So
that's just going to go away altogether.
It's going to go away, yeah.
Well, then we won't have a choice next year.
But if we want to talk about the flu vaccine, there are some other options. If you're older than 60, what we found is that there's a high potency vaccine that's probably more effective. So older people should get the higher potency flu shot.
That's me now. I'm finally, okay, I'm over the hump.
All right. Then there are some other different types of flu shots that you can get. There's something called the intradermal shot, which it's not a harpoon, as you say, so much as a little prick that that goes in the superficial layers of your skin. That may even be more effective.
But all the options you can discuss with your primary care.
Yep.
And I think that's probably the most important takeaway message. Is we have such phenomenal medical providers. We talk about how much we really appreciate the level of caring. When you start looking at different medical centers and their turnover, we lose somebody and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, somebody's leaving. People really do put their heart and soul into taking care of the residents of Milford. So the takeaway message is, if you have a question, discuss it with your primary care. Get to understand what your options are and get to know the facts. And as always, thank you for taking care of us and our family.
My pleasure.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless and may tomorrow be a healthier night than tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.